right. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Drew Williams. I'm the marketing manager for Kobiton, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Manual and Automated Testing, Learning from Trailblazers. As mentioned previously, we've got some great QA professionals on the webinar today from Calm, Green Sky, as well as Magenic. And so I will turn it over really fast to them to do some intros. So from Green Sky, we've got Crystal Escalante, who is the VP of Technology Process in QA. At Calm, we've got Corey Weinstein, who's the head of QA, and then from Magenic, we've got Paul Grisafi, who is the principal automation architect. Guys, go ahead and say just a couple words about yourselves really fast, and we'll get started from there.
Hey, this is Crystal Escalante. Happy to be part of this panel today. I've been in QA for at least, I want to say 19 years, so lots of experience on the manual and automation tracks, seen a lot of different paths grow from, different methodologies of people delivering things via waterfall or different variations of agile processes. So looking forward to the panel today.
Hey, hello, this is Corey. I've been in QA for about 9 years now. I've worked on small and medium teams in the past at credit card companies, mobile payment companies, educational companies, so all across the board, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Corey.
This is Paul Grisafi, and as it says, I'm a principal automation architect at a consulting company called Magenic. I've been in QA and automation for far too long, and I'm still enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to moderating today's panel.
Thanks, Paul. And with that, I will give you the rules very fast. So each panelist will have approximately 3 minutes to answer each question, and all audience questions will be saved and answered at the end of the webinar. So feel free to begin queuing up your questions or even submitting your questions throughout the event. Just know that we will save these for the end of the webinar. And then one last FYI to everyone on the event today, this recording will be made available on our YouTube channel early next week and will be sent out via email to everyone who is registered for the webinar. So with that, thanks everyone for attending, and we'll go ahead and get started. Paul?
All right, well, we'll start with our first question, and we'll go with Corey first today. So how do you define testing for your team or for your organization?
Okay, testing for me is using the knowledge of logic, your user base, and core product and key performance indicators to help your team and users. It can take many forms, especially across different companies and kinds of products. So in the end, it's making sure what is important to your company is accurate and stable. I find it to be a sort of helpful tool for your company. And with the right sort of testing, you can help engineers fix bugs without context switching, to speed up their engineering development time and resources. You can help data analysts and your product team make sure that they can know that running a B tester of new features they're in the wild and will come back with accurate data and results. And of course, you can help your users and value props by providing a quality product.
All right, great. So Corey, Crystal, same question over to you. For your team and for your organization, how do you define testing?
We define testing by ensuring that what we're testing passes and meets the acceptance criteria requirements that's given to us, and not just meets it as it's written, but the user stories or epics itself, to make sure that they're meeting the needs of our business. So we define our test around that, using insights from knowing the applications, how our users use the systems and tools, making sure that they, again, meet that acceptance criteria, but they are also sustainable for the business and our systems. That would mean they are secure projects, secure coded projects. They meet performance indicators, not just from a KPI standpoint, but for growth. So anything that comes through that's testable, we're going to make sure that it meets performance indicators for today versus a year from now.
All right, great. So moving on to the next question. And here we're going to start with Crystal. Crystal, when you're hiring for your team, what what kind of qualifications are you looking for? What kind of skills are you looking for? What kind of people are you looking for? What's sort of on your plate or your radar for when you hire new people into your testing team?
We're looking for people that have a high emotional IQ, of course. We're looking for people who have had experience with agile processes, people who are experienced with automation or have the aptitude to learn it, people who are innovative, someone who's not going to just look at technology, but also look at the business, be interested in learning the business and making the business better. Because again, we want to look at both sides of that. It's not just about technology, but it's about delivering the right thing with technology. We look for people, again, innovative, people who keep up with things that are going on and can make suggestions and keep growing and learning, because that makes all of us better, and people that can help share the things that they learned with the rest of their team members. Those are the top qualities we look for. Certain technologies, whether they know Java, JavaScript, things like that, those are secondary to those top qualities.
All right, thank you. Corey, so same question for you. When you're hiring for your team, what are you looking for in a candidate? What makes a candidate something really appealing for you to have them join your team?
We look for people who can sniff out bugs as easily as breathing, but really we're looking for people who know that QA is the branch of software engineering they want to focus on and is not a stepping stone for other kinds of development, who are passionate about their career. We like autonomous people who can take charge of creating automated tests and test plans, who can proactively reach out to engineers and product employees if needed to clarify behavior and specs. And in addition, we're looking for QA engineers who communicate effectively. The shorter the time an engineer spends understanding the bug itself, the more time an engineer has to fix the issue thoroughly. We're also looking for QA engineers that have a strong sense of how important bugs are in the context of the company. For example, it's important to know what percentage of users a certain bug can affect and the likelihood of a bug causing a negative experience, which could decrease your KPIs. And knowing priority and escalating bugs when required is an important skill, especially in preserving engineering time and resources.
All righty, let's go on to the next question, please. All right, so this one says Crystal, but Corey, I'm gonna ask you to participate on it as well. But what I did is in preparation for this, and Crystal, I did notice you mentioned business in your previous answer as well, so it aligns pretty well and flows pretty well here. But in your description of what a QA rockstar is, the definition and the description, they're focused a lot on business. So how do you coach your team on aligning to business goals?
So when we look at our business goals, we try to make sure that people understand the roadmap for the vertical that they're working on, and that's the vertical unit within all of our business units. If they don't understand that roadmap, they're not going to understand why they're doing something. And if you don't understand why you're doing it, how are you going to effectively test it? So we make sure that that base understanding is there, and then as you trickle down into the delivery teams, all of the epics for that, and they're reviewing them. If they understand the high level why, once they get to how it's being implemented, they'll be able to ask the right questions about how it's being developed and implemented, again, to support their testing of it, because they'll be testing the right things and not wasting time on testing the wrong things, which again optimizes the entire delivery.
So Corey, how do you get your team to focus on or align to the business goals?
One very important thing we have is an internal prioritization doc, which highlights the importance of different features across the company, which is very detailed and really helps align us on the same prioritization scheme. We also meet regularly with product and to align our goals and make sure that we're all focused and on the same team when it comes to what is important to the business and what we are looking for, what are key performance indicators and how are we optimizing for that, and understanding that features that come through a pipeline Each word, like every space, is really important, and you can tell, especially on subscription screens, that one thing out of place can decrease your subscriptions by 10%. So really being aligned on what is important to your company, it makes a big difference.
I absolutely agree. So now on to the next question. And we'll start with Corey this time. So Corey, your rockstar description focuses on the users and sort of being empathetic toward your users. How do you emphasize and coach your team on being empathetic that way?
Well, I guess we should start first on why user empathy is important. Like, if you have a product which is advertised as a high value product, like charging a premium for a service when you have competitors in the marketplace, you need to provide a core workable experience for your users. This includes responding to top user bugs and requests in order to sustain your user base and improve retention, especially when you have a subscription-based service. This also helps with having your users naturally promote your product, improving your Net Promoter Score, helps procure you new users organically and relatively free. And also, users help you find bugs which are important to them. And one bug in your emails, first-time user experience flows, or upsell screens can cost your company thousands of bucks in potential earnings. If you have a good QA customer support relationship, you can identify important problems more quickly and resolve those issues. So how do we emphasize with our users? So QA meets weekly with our customer support team to go over existing and new issues in our bug tracking system to make sure they're prioritized correctly. And this helps us keep aligned on what users are caring about, update smoke tests to reflect bugs coming in, and also escalate or de-escalate issues to save time and help overall organization for your engineering, data, and product teams across the company. One of the things I really enjoy is one of our QA performance metrics is how many bugs have been reported by users rather than been reported by employees or QA. And this helps keep us aware of what kinds of bugs are slipping through QA. It helps us improve our processes to account for these bugs. And we also go through top user flows and amplitude to make sure that the paths users take are free of issues.
Great. Okay. So, Crystal, how do you work with being sort of user-centric? So you've got the business umbrella you're looking at, you want to align the business goals, but is there a user facet to that that's separate, or do you just focus on business and that's kind of covered under your business umbrella?
Oh, no, we absolutely focus on users as well, because I think we all agree that's an important aspect to delivering anything. You want to make sure that it meets the end user's needs. So depending on which area we're working on, most of the teams will reach out to the end users for the project that they're working on, and they will let them know, hey, this is coming down the pipeline. Here's the user stories that are coming through. This is, the intent of them. And they'll give them a time frame of when that's going to hit one of our systems in order for them to log in and test it out themselves. We don't normally give users scripts to run because we want them to do exploratory testing and their natural flows of using the system. And that's when we get most of the value. And we try to do that as early as possible in this life cycle to get that valuable feedback from them. It's not something that's, right before it goes to prod, oh, by the way, let me give it to a user. They're involved early. Some of them are even involved in actual writing the stories themselves and giving input on how it's going to be designed.
Great. All right. So we'll shift gears a little bit here, more to the direct topic of of the webinar of sort of the manual versus automated. And with Crystal, I know that you've got a highly automated approach to your testing. So when looking at things, well, a lot of times teams will get very anxious and very zealous about, quote, automating everything, but we know that automating everything typically is not practical. So how do you go about deciding what not to automate?
The teams take a risk-based approach to testing, period. So if you've got something that's low risk that you're not going to be able to reach for testing, that's going to be the same thing for automating it. If it's, you can also use it in terms of ROI. If you can't run a test case more than 2 times, there's no ROI in automating it. You're going to spend more time actually automating something that you could run manually in a few minutes for the verification. So that's kind of how we value some of that. And then there's a deeper dive into what to automate, not to automate, depending on your time frame. Again, it goes back to the risk-based approach of what value am I going to get by automating this login screen versus if I automate the shopping cart feature, for an example. So they're going to look at it in those terms and decide what to do for the project.
All right, and Corey, I know that you don't have very much in the way of automation at the current, and I know you're looking to add that to your arsenal of approaches for testing. Do you have anything to add, or a different sort of philosophy on how to decide what you don't automate?
Well, yeah, right now we don't have many automated cases, but COM is primarily an audio app and a website, so it's very difficult to automate, like, is this audio playing right now? It doesn't sound good. So many of our test cases are surrounding audio, so we're not really able to perform automation on those cases.
All right, makes sense to me. So let's go next slide, please. And we'll start with Corey this time. And so I didn't. So this is not my wording, Drew. But so with a testing approach that is largely not automated, how do you reconcile statements that are made out in social media and some of the thought leaders and such out there saying that manual testing is going away and that test automation is a must if you want high performance? Agree, disagree, opinions, thoughts, spraying mace at whoever asks those types of questions?
Well, if just for my sake, I hope manual testing is not going away, as I'll be out of the job. But in all seriousness, how you set up your QA team and procedure is all about, cost-benefit analysis and the trajectory of your company. Like, what are the costs and benefits of manual QA, and what are the costs and benefits of automation? I prefer to approach with both. So the benefits of manual QA is that you're able to test more and also find more edge cases in test automation as you're manually interacting with the product. Like, human observation is vital to really know how user-friendly and intuitive a feature is. And oftentimes manual QA folks may find themselves to be part of the small minority of employees who actually interact and use your product on a day-to-day basis. And this provides QA engineers with more insight into test cases and what is important to cover, as well as providing product feedback. From previous experience working with teams with both manual and automation engineers, manual QA finds more bugs for new and existing features. So it's easier to maintain a higher quality product, even though it may take more time. And another benefit is that engineers write specs for manual QA on how to test new features, and this helps engineers think about their feature more logically and they themselves may discover in the process an edge case they have not thought of before that will help improve the feature before it even comes to QA. For manual QA, there are tools like Rainforest QA, which can help you perform smoke tests of application like 10 times per day if strapped for manual QA resources. So I believe it's more important to have in-house QA as they have more contextual knowledge and can ask other members of the company for expected behaviors. For a primarily audio-based company, such as COM, manual testing is pretty much essential to test the audio features of our application. But there are some costs with manual QA. It generally takes longer than test automation, especially in continuous deployment environments. Human error is always a factor. Manual QA may not have the resources to cover full regression tests, and some companies argue that engineers writing test specs from manual QA is a cost of engineering time. I feel like the benefits of test automation really shine when combined with manual QA. I prefer an approach where manual QA goes through features, and once those features are bug-free, then we can create automated tests around features. It has many benefits. One benefit is that when an engineer is working on a feature before an item reaches QA, they can see regressions and fix those in context to save engineering and manual QA time. One of my favorite things is screenshots. They help product and manual QA recognize the difference between builds and may provide insight into changes in your KPIs. And automated performance testing also tends to be very helpful in isolating load and battery issues. Some drawbacks to test automation. Creating automated tests takes time, and tests may not be completed before an app is released to production. It's not possible to cover all edge cases, which would be easily testable by a manual QA than not. Sometimes with automated tests, one experiences context bias, where the QA is focused on creating tests around the correct behavior rather than looking for bugs, and it takes time to keep tests up to date. Automated testing, it's difficult to make sure that users are having a positive experience, and automation tools tend to take a significant investment in initial test creation and upkeep. So in the end, I prefer an approach with both.
All right, thank you. Crystal, your thoughts on these statements here?
I've heard a lot of people say this over the years, and I don't agree with it. You're always going to have a form of manual testing. So we know there's different types of testing, from unit to end. There's lots of things in between. Exploratory testing from our end users, that's always going to be manual. Sure, after they run the first one, you could record and play it back or automate that afterwards, but that then goes into the regression suite. Any new functional test, again, going to the users, that's going to be manual. So I don't think that manual testing is dying. Will it decrease as we continue down the road with a lot of people doing continuous integration and delivery, because that does require a lot more automation? Yes, but there will still be a manual testing aspect of that piece, even after it goes through the pipelines.
All right, I'm glad you both talked about pipelines, because we'll get to that here in a couple of minutes as well. But first, next question, please. Oh, no, so we'll get to it right now. All right, we'll start with Crystal here. Crystal, how do continuous integration and continuous deployment or delivery factor into your testing approach? And how does it change your testing approach?
So CI/CD, it factors into our testing approach, because everything that we deliver, we want to be able to go into our continuous integration pipeline. And that's where we are right now. We have not gotten to continuous delivery yet. It's on our roadmap to be done before the end of this year. So for continuous integration, we make sure that we have automated unit tests. We have automated functional tests before the story gets out of dev. And then the regression suite that goes with those changes is there to complement it as well. Those changes get deployed, those tests run. If those pass, they move further up the stack out to prod. The next step is going to have that set up to where when someone does a check-in it will automatically deploy if the automation tests pass. But again, we're not quite there yet. Looking forward to getting there again at the end of this year.
Okay, I'd like to follow up on one thing I think you said there was that before it leaves dev, each feature or story or whatever will have unit tests and some level of integration and feature test automated. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So then your organization is prepared to hold up a feature and therefore potentially a release because an automated test is not complete, or do you have some sort of exemption process, or how does that go? And I'm asking because I hear this a lot, and then when I ask the follow-up question about, are you willing to hold up a whole release because of one missing automated script, the answer has been universally no.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is no as well. You're going to analyze that fail. Why did it fail? Because it could have failed just because a data piece was wrong. You're going to analyze that and then push it forward or pull it back. It just depends on the why.
All right. So Corey, for you, and I know this is probably going to be a lot different for you, CI and CD, how does it factor into your testing approach, especially since you don't have a whole lot of automation right now?
Yeah, right now at COM, we found that putting QA in charge of the deployment process makes the whole deployment process much easier, as that QA can check dependencies of features and also lends more time for QA to inform relevant parties around the company that certain features are going out. Right now we have a Kanban style like CI deployment process. Since at the moment at COM, before code is merged into master and deployed, most code runs through QA and unit tests to check and make sure that there are no regressions or no noteworthy bugs. And this allows QA to know what changes occur at any given time. So if there are issues in production with the area of your product, it is much easier to isolate and find the issue. Since COM is pretty bootstrapped in resources at the moment, we don't have automated tests surrounding every release. So this is where we want to head.
All righty, so let's go to the next question, please. So as you probably know, AI and ML and related technologies are big in the industry right now. Everybody's very excited about AI and lots of, is it going to take my job? Is it not going to take my job? Is it even feasible? So Corey, we'll start with you this time. Do you currently use AI or ML tools in your testing, or do you have any plans to?
Right now, at the moment, we don't use AI or machine learning tools in testing. In an optimal world, I think it'd be really cool to examine user flows and from the frequency and relation of the data points from sources like amplitude and full story to create optimized test suites that will automatically be like, okay, this data point, click this button, and then they click this button, and just spin up automated tests around those. In a perfect world, that'd be pretty awesome.
All right, and then Crystal, same question to you. Do you currently use any AI or ML tools, and if not, is that something that's on your roadmap or your radar right now?
We do have a couple of teams that are using it for specific functions within GreenSky. So it's going through, they've built an AI tool that will go through a lot of data and pick up trends in order for us to adjust certain pieces of our business. And I have to be pretty vague about that because it is proprietary, but yes, we are using it.
No, and that totally makes sense. That's actually one of the places where I see AI and ML being able to be applied, is looking at these gobs and gobs and gobs of data we get out of test runs or automation runs, and saying trends, or let's classify this class of results into one bucket versus another bucket. So that's pretty cool. So Drew, I don't know if there should be another question after this because we skipped one along the way. Do we have another slide?
We actually don't, Paul, but feel free to go ahead and ask that question.
All right, there was one more, and I think the attendees will probably be interested. And we'll start. Let's see, we start with Corey there. So we'll start with Crystal. Crystal, what mechanisms do you use to track changes in your product quality over time, so that you can potentially adjust what your approach or your focus is with testing?
Product quality over time. So metrics that we look at monthly are defect leakage metrics. So how many defects leaked out of development. It's not just about what got to prod, it's what made it out of the development lifecycle. We also track business value and the scope of the projects. So what was the business value, high or low? Was the complexity of the project high or low? And we try to see what the trend over the month was for that. We also look at staleness of stories. We look at the quality of stories. So how many times did a story go back into a solution or anything before ready status, before a team could pick it up? We have different reports that pulls that data out for our product teams.
All right, and Corey, same question for you. What mechanisms do you and your team use to track changes in product quality over time?
Some things we look for is how many bugs are found during and after development, how many times a feature goes to and from QA and engineering before it is feature complete. And we tend to look at like how our KPIs and how they are in the wild, and if bugs affected them at all. So if there's a decrease in our KPIs that's affected by a bug, it's a big blow for us.
All righty. Well, thank you very much for the prepared section of the webinar. So, Drew, I'm going to punt it back over to you and let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Corey and Crystal, for those great answers. We do have some wonderful questions from our audience here, quite a few, and hopefully we're able to get to them all. If not, we will respond via email. So first things first, looks like a general question. So if you both would provide some insights here. How do you define a stable app from a QA perspective? So Corey or Crystal, feel free to start there.
I'll start. So how do you define a stable app from a QA perspective? One of the biggest metrics Com would use is like how many bugs are coming in from support and how many users are reporting these bugs. This is important for us because we are one of the things that's very important for us is our Net Promoter Score and getting more and more people on our app. So the more bugs that people run into, the less likely that they're actually going to recommend that to users.
Hey, we check stability. So the first thing we're going to look at are, did the functional regression test pass? If yes, that is probably stable. The second thing that I would look at for stability would be the performance test as well, to make sure that it is performing to the metrics that the product owner gave for what's expected in prod. Because if it's not doing that, then it's not going to be a stable product either.
Got it. Great answers, both of you. Crystal, this one looks like it's aimed specifically at Green Sky. It says, you mentioned that login screen doesn't add value to automate, but shouldn't the login screen be automated as a part of smoke testing for the application? Also, in Agile, automation is part of the definition of done for our team because we want our regression phase to be fully automated. Should that be the end goal?
I think what I said was misunderstood. We were talking about risk-based approach, and I just threw that out there as an example of if you're slammed in a 2-week sprint and maybe you didn't have time to automate everything, and I just threw out an example of things. Automating a login screen is very important. That's not what I meant at all. You want to get end-to-end flows automated. Absolutely. We were just talking about how we try to automate everything. If we have a large project rollout and only so much time, what do you do first? What do you not do? What do you add to your automation backlog versus what do you do during the middle of the project? So again, a bad example on my part, but you're going to analyze your system for all of those test cases. If you have manual test cases that you're just automating, if that's your format, then you're going to do a risk-based approach of those to see what you automate first, what has the highest ROI. If you're doing a progressive automation approach to where you're automating as the stories are being developed in your environment, you're going to look at your functional user story and make sure you can automate all of the acceptance criteria during that. And you're going to look at the highest value of each one of those points to make sure you get the end-to-end flow for the highest value automation output. I hope that was a little clearer than the previous answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do appreciate that clarity.
And
Go ahead.
Ryan just brought up a very important part is your definition of done and making sure that your definition of done has been met for the story that's being automated.
Okay. Corey, this one seems to be targeted toward you. What do you use for screenshotting, and what would you say are the main issues with that tool, if any?
Right now we use right now we use a robot framework. And what were the drawbacks for that tool? Was that the question?
Yep.
Right now, there aren't any significant drawbacks. So we're able to capture every screen in our site and mobile apps pretty thoroughly, and it's been a great tool for us to determine if screens look different, because it's very important, especially for our first-time user experience flows and also our core product, to make sure that everything remains stable visually, so that we can perform A/B tests successfully.
Awesome. Okay. This seems to be a question for the panel. So both Crystal and Corey, if you would please answer, and Paul, feel free to throw something in there at the end if you'd like as well. But how do you track business value?
So we track business value. You could look at that in monetary terms of how much revenue do you think it's going to bring into the company. It's also factored in with that complexity score. So if you have something that's highly complex to develop, but it's only going to bring $500,000 into the company, is it really worth doing? Versus if it's something that's low complexity and brings $500,000 in, that might be more value. But vice versa. But again, those reports that we pull track that value across some of the stuff that we've done, and we look for that input to come in before a project is actually accepted.
For Com, we track business value by how many subscriptions are coming in, and also our Net Promoter Score. So we do a Net Performance Score check every now and then to make sure that our app and websites are up to par, and we can get more organic traffic and increase our company's value.
Awesome. Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, so all those things, absolutely all those things. But I also like to boil it down a bit more to, especially I tend to come from the automation front when we talk about this, and that is, are we further along to meeting our business goals? So all that other information should be in support of the business goals is what I've always thought, or what I've more recently thought. And if we're not achieving our business goals, we have to ask why. Is it our testing approach? Is it our automation approach? Are we developing the right thing? Are we just slow to market? And then figuring out what we can do with our testing approach to help us sort of regroup and go back toward meeting those business goals. Because it largely, as you go high up enough on the food chain and the corporate hierarchy, at some point it shouldn't matter whether a particular thing is automated or manual, or whether a human did it or a machine or an elf, as long as the money that was put into it has provided some value to meeting those business goals, then the how that particular part of the sausage got made shouldn't matter.
Great metaphors there, Paul. Appreciate that. Okay, so another one for the panel. And at this point, Paul, do feel free to throw your insights in there as soon as Corey and Crystal finish up. But do any of you use mutation testing in the QA process at all, or plan to?
So I'll start. I haven't done, quote, real structured mutation testing, but back when I worked for a telecommunications company, one of the things we were developing was an automated testing platform, if you will. Outside of a tool, it was a whole sort of infrastructure for all the automation, in addition to any of the supporting infrastructure for the tests themselves or the scripts themselves. Some of the event-driven stuff we were writing, we just didn't have the capacity or the tools at the time, because this was back in the 90s, to do all the testing of the tool platform itself that we wanted to. So sometimes I would go in and change my code a little bit to make it function a little differently. so that we could actually say, okay, I have now broken something. Did my test actually catch that? Or the test that's now failing because I can't reproduce this weird scenario is now passing because I was able to reproduce the weird scenario. That's not strictly what we would go for mutation testing from a definition standpoint, but that's kind of the closest I've gotten to it.
We don't currently have that implemented here. I mean, the closest that we would have is, some things that would happen during unit test, taking unit test a little further, but that would be it.
Yeah, right now, COM also doesn't do mutation testing.
Okay, great. Next question for the group. At which point do QA team members get involved in the dev cycle?
Day one, as soon as the story's there to be reviewed, they're involved. They're involved in the design. They're involved in even some of the pair programming. If they're learning anything new, they're definitely involved in code review because we're on 2-week sprints, and you have to be. That's part of to throw out a buzzword, shift left approach, but heavily involved from day one.
Us as well. QA is involved in the design process, even the feature creation process, sometimes creating features themselves. Also involved in writing specs before engineers even start coding, which is very helpful.
Great, Paul. Was there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think they've well covered it.
Great. Okay. This next one is a bit of a personal question, but definitely a good one. And it's coming from someone who is currently in the process of switching careers from a teacher to a tester. And the question is, I'm currently learning Java and Selenium. And as someone who's switching careers, do you think this is the right approach to becoming a tester? What is popular or will be popular, and what is dying in the test environment?
So I'll take a stab at that first. If you're trying to go from teacher to tester, it sounds like you're picking up a tool for testing, for automation, versus learning the core of what testing really is. So I would suggest learning the core of testing basics, so you understand what you're testing and not just how to automate it.
Yeah, I agree that it's important to get the testing fundamentals. For me, I was really lucky in having an internship right out of college, which really helped me learn the testing fundamentals. And if you have the opportunity to do that, it would be great. And personally, I'd suggest starting with manual QA, so you know what to look for, what test cases you should be automating for, and then on top of that, learning automation tools.
Yeah, I think that's great advice on both fronts. The only addition I would make is sometimes people have the luxury to do that, and sometimes they don't. And if they don't, it may be because the area they're in, the company they work for, not exactly in this case, but they won't hire a tester that doesn't know some programming language, that doesn't know Java or Selenium or whatever. So this person may have to split his or her time between testing theory, which is great, and some QA, some automation theory, and some automation implementation as well.
And just to throw it out there, there's several companies that do crowdsource testing that you can get involved in as a beginner level to start getting some testing experience there, and you get certain badges as you move up through it.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Awesome insights. Okay, next question for the group. Do automation and performance go hand in hand or side by side?
I'll jump in for this
one. Question?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, do automation and performance go hand in hand?
So automation and performance, meaning performance as a different type of testing. I mean, that testing is a form of an automated test, but it's not something you would run to test your functional changes. It has a sole purpose of testing the performance and response times on a system itself. And there's different variations of that load stress as well. So it's a different type of technique, in my opinion.
I think that the way you measure performance is like you have load issues, you have battery issues, you have user experience, and personally, I feel that with manual exploratory testing, you can get a higher performance product, but automation keeps the performance stable.
And from my standpoint, I'm no performance expert, and I did not sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But yeah, a lot of times those two kind of get conflated because they both tend to be programming, if you will. A lot of times, what you create to drive load testing is sort of programmatic, and it looks and smells like automated scripts. And hey, I want to reuse my unit tests and my UI tests for performance, and that doesn't usually scale because you're usually looking for other things. And what I've seen in my experience, especially working with people that really knew what they were doing in the performance and load testing arena, is that the actual creation of the program and the thing that drives it is interesting, but that's like a very small part. It's really more along the lines of coming up with what this scenario should be, working with the business owners and the product owners and the technicians and stuff to go in and say, here are the performance profiles we are interested in modeling, and then helping them figure out where performance bottlenecks are or places that they can improve their performance. And a lot of times when we talk about performance, a lot of things get conflated there as well between load testing, capacity testing, back what we in the telecom world would talk as traffic testing. A lot of times we will not be sufficiently specific when we say, hey, we need to do some performance testing. My question always is, what do you mean by performance testing? So we can all kind of get on the same page there.
Okay, fantastic. And just a heads up to everyone, these questions continue to roll in. So we very likely won't reach all of them, and we'll follow up after the webinar, but we'll go ahead and continue while we have some more time. Again, to the entire panel, if you have some unusual bugs, for instance, those that can't be reproduced in the test environment, what should you do about those?
Well, first I try to reproduce them on prod, because sometimes bugs are only reproducible in your prod environment versus your dev environment. If the bugs are really bad, try and go with engineers and isolate it in code. Use some debugging tools to see like what is potentially causing the issue. And also I look at user profiles and configurations to see if there's patterns.
Hey, Ryan's going to take this one.
Yeah, hey, this is Ryan. I'm one of the test leads here. And on our side, what we usually do when you have a bug that's not easily retestable, if we can't, we take a chance to try to see if we can recreate it. If not, we do work closely with our dev team, and they will take a look at it from the code side to see if they can finagle with some stuff to try to get that reproduction, or see if they can just catch it by eye. But outside of that, if you can't reproduce it, it's very difficult to try to track it down and solve it.
Yeah, so our environment isn't conducive to testing and prod. I mean, you're talking, we loan origination, so we can't really do live test loans. It's not allowed.
And that being said, we do put on a list where we keep track of it, so to see if it pops up again, or if we can catch it later down the road as we do other things.
Okay, awesome. How useful is behavior-driven testing?
It's very useful because it helps you find bugs up front versus later on.
I would agree. Behavior-driven testing is very important to really align with what your users are looking at, and also evaluate potential logic points that you need to spec up for your smoke tests to cover in the future.
And then I have a little bit of a different take on that. Behavior-driven development is less about testing and automation. Those are some great side effects and some great conveniences that we get from the BDD approach, but really the BDD approach is more about gaining a shared understanding, traditionally between the so-called three amigos, the product and QA and the development team, so that when we, the team, say, yes, we understand what this story is going to be, and here's how we know we have completed this story, there are much fewer surprises at the end. And the fact that we can write those words out in English-like sentences that can be parsed and then executed automatically and get checkmarks that say yes or no for each of those acceptance criteria, that's great. It's great, but that's not really what the intended purpose of BDD is. If you ascribe to the Scrum definition of a story, that a story is a reminder to have a conversation, then BDD and other test-first approaches are sort of a formalized framework or structured framework in order to have that conversation.
That makes sense. Okay, and then kind of circling back to the question previous, do any of you do testing in production as part of the process, not just investigating live issues, such as using a feature flag approach to development and continuous release?
We do not. Again, that's not something that's conducive to our environment.
Yeah, right now, testing in prod, like what we first do is make sure that data points are not recorded for any employees doing testing on prod, which is very important. And secondly, sometimes we do testing in prod just to make sure that the feature is, like, one, there, and two, is working okay.
And what we can do is we have a UAT environment, which is an obfuscated copy of prod that it gives us the ability to test all of that with actually having to touch live data. So we just make sure that everything is passing and getting the proper results there before we push it to prod. So by the time we go to prod, it should be seamless and non-disruptive.
So in my consulting role, we do not test in production. There are too many things that can go wrong there. If our client does want to test in production, we'll help them get things set up, but the actual pushing of the buttons or clicking of keys or driving anything toward their production environment is not something we do, because there is a risk associated with that. That said, other companies that I've worked at where I've been an employee of that company, we have done limited testing in production, often during a maintenance cycle, but sometimes during a non-maintenance cycle as well, because we were able to know, okay, these things are non-destructive, so we can look up a product in production, and that's not going to change anything that's really interesting about the website. We can't buy something from production because that will appreciably change something in production that we're not prepared to handle from a testing organization standpoint.
Great insights. Another one for the panel. How do you keep your QA team motivated on a year-to-year basis?
We encourage the guys to stay innovative, try to find things that they're interested in, keep pushing them to learn new things, growing on their career path. Ability to go to certain conferences to help do that. There's always, the monetary things like bonus, and that makes most people happy. But that's it for the most part.
Well, right now, Comm has a QA team of one, so it's mostly how I keep myself motivated, and it's mostly making sure that your product is bug-free as possible, and realizing the number of bugs that you're finding and how it's contributing to your company and to your users is very rewarding.
Okay. This is a great one. I'm currently at an organization where the value of QA is not fully appreciated. Is this something that any of you have experienced before in your careers, and how have you gone about showing the importance of QA to the rest of the organization?
I can't say I've firsthand had that issue, because usually once you provide the value of running those tests and catching all of those bugs early on and saying, hey, this definitely can't get to prod like this, your value is seen up front. So I couldn't really speak too much to it.
Yeah, I've worked at a company where QA, the value of QA wasn't really realized, as I was the first QA hired for mobile and wanted to expand into web and API. What is really important to highlight the value of QA is being like, okay, like here's a bug that made it to production. This is the value taken away, and these are bugs found before it hit production, and the estimated savings on how it could affect your KPIs is like, okay, like this bug could have had a negative effect on our KPIs, and this is exactly how much money we saved or other data points that we improved because of this bug. And it's good to realize, like, and give your employers and other employees a good estimate on, like, okay, like these are the benefits, these are the costs, but I really believe that the value of testing is going to improve, and this is how, with concrete data.
Yeah, and for me, that's usually a smell. If the testing team or QA team or what have you isn't valued, then either they're testing the wrong thing, or there's a breakdown in the communication about what it is that they are doing and the value they're bringing to the table, and having that conversation about, no, I think y'all are missing what we're doing here, the value we're providing, the things we are catching as opposed to the things we're not, and then talking with the people who aren't finding the value and asking, okay, if we're not adding the value you think we should be, what is it that we're missing in your eyes? And just having that conversation in their vocabulary, and talking less about testing and talking more about what it is the people complaining are concerned about.
Awesome. Okay, that was a great question to wrap this webinar on. I know that we have quite a few more questions actually to get to, but for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and end right now. As I said, we'll follow up with everyone with those questions within the next few days, likely around the same time that you receive the email with the actual webinar recording. And so with that said, I do want to just go ahead and take a moment to thank our panelists, Corey, Crystal, and Paul, Ryan and Mason as well from Green Sky in the background there. We sincerely appreciate you guys participating today, and thank you to the audience for attending. And again, if you have any further questions, do feel free to submit those before the answers from these go out next week. With that, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.